FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
John Arquilla's article in Foreign Policy, The New Rules of War. I'm quoting you, John. A decade and a half after a colleague and I coined the term Netwar, the United States is still behind the curve. Our big ships, big guns, and big battalions are sure to be the wrong approach to waging the wars of the future. Close quote. Let's begin with a definition of a term, which is not just a term, but your thesis for some years now, Netwar.
It's the way networks make war. And what's a network? It's a loose connection between people. A lot of folks think a network is how you're wired. We think, David Ronfeldt and I, who came up with this, think that a network is more like what anthropologists think of when they say networks, the social connections between people, whether they're talking to each other, whether they have runners going between them, or they're using cellular phones. So that's the network. And now what does that imply for warfare?
I have to say, when you say network to me, I think immediately Facebook.
Yeah,
or MySpace.
Cyberspace. Yeah, exactly. And that's certainly one of the things that has empowered these social connections, and they've overturned tyrannies in a number of countries, for example, in the last 15 years, which is something that David and I predicted.
The Velvet Revolution in Eastern Europe, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine.
The color revolutions. I think even the breaking of one-party power in the Republic of Korea is a good example of the use of these technologies for social networking. The wires matter, but it's the social connections we thought that were going to be most powerful, and we thought that those who would be most empowered would be the terrorists, particularly, as we wrote back in '96, this little group called Al-Qaeda, which seemed to be very devoted to the idea of creating a global network. So against that, heavy tanks, aircraft carriers and such were going to be very, very bulky, too expensive, and not very effective in taking them down. The real question, however, is does the network scale up to fighting the larger wars that inevitably will come? I know Victor's written about big wars can come again. And surely they will. And my hypothesis is that this new approach will actually do better against old-style big war opponents. It's going to give us a chance to compete with the terrorists.
So you believe that technology has fundamentally altered the terms of engagement now and forevermore, or you believe that the technology has made possible one new form of warfare which is likely to expand and be developed by this or that group alongside what we think of as traditional or conventional warfare?
I think yes to both, if that's okay. Every era of technological change has implied new forms of military organization and new doctrines, just as the tank and the plane and the radio came together to give us blitzkrieg. And you had to have that armored division where you concentrated that hitting power in order to get the maximum effect.
Right.
Well, this is a time where instead of concentrating all your power in one place, you want to distribute it as widely across many nodes as you can. Al-Qaeda has a relatively small number of operatives, but they're spread out everywhere. And one of the things we've learned about this modern globalized world is that the destructive and disruptive power of even very small numbers can be quite great.